Taking a little break here at Steveston, hanging out at the breakwater. Got to see a little beach action going on here and some Fraser River. My name is Shannon Douglas, and this is a YouTube channel while we were asleep. A lot of us haven't been paying attention for a long time about what's going on in the world, and just kind of assumed that everything is running along hunky-dory. And then one day, we're waking up to find out that there's a whole lot of stuff going on that just doesn't seem right. There really is. There's whole bodies of ideological beliefs that have infiltrated our universities, stifling free thought, free inquiry, free expression. A majority percentage of people in universities are self-censoring, which means they're not speaking openly. And it's happening in workplaces too, because the products of the university ideology have graduated university. They've gone out to the workforce, and they've started implementing some of these ideas and ideologies and practices in workplaces. The universities have been training activists for a couple of decades to go out and do this, to install and to create what seems to be the utopian society, or at least that's what we would assume that they're trying to create, but they're doing that by identifying all the problems in the world. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about family systems theory and a little bit about bullying, and then let's see if we can draw some parallels to what's happening with woke ideology in our universities, our schools, and our workplaces. So the idea of bullying, let's start in family systems theory. So I've mentioned a couple of times, and I talk about my childhood not out of any kind of desire for anybody to feel sorry for me, because I've been through healing circles and conversations with people over many years, and what I know is that if you scratch the surface, most people have a bunch of garbage, whether they've directly experienced or their family, people in their family or their friends. Trauma is a very common thing in human experience. So I'm not saying I'm special or uniquely victimized or anything like that. In fact, I think it's gauche, and I wish I didn't have to talk about it like this, because largely I've made peace with the reason I'm here and the things that I had to go through, because all those things that I learned, I think, were for a reason, and I think that this is part of that reason. It's to share it with you. So in a dysfunctional family dynamic, an alcoholic family, an abusive partner family, we have a really poor understanding of what that is in the modern world, because we assume that men are perpetrators and women are victims. And this is the consequence of a more radical feminist ideology. The reality is that male and female bullies are about as proportional in the world as each other. Men tend to act out their aggressions in different ways than women. Men tend to act out physical aggressions, and women tend to act out social aggressions, gossip and reputational sabotage and undermining people's confidence and things like that. So in a family system, there is the abuser, the alcoholic or the cluster B personality disorder, or the abusive personality, let's call them. And then there's an enabler. And that person makes excuses for the abuser. They minimize and they kind of make excuses, and they're trapped in this relationship, often in what's called a trauma bond. But they allow the abuser to get away with their behaviors. And they facilitate that by making those excuses. So you've got the abuser and you've got the enabler, and I'm trying to find here a good spot. There we go. Now I can kind of see. Maybe I'm squinting. And then you have the roles that other people in the family play. So in my family, I used to say my brother caused the shit. I got the shit. My sister's shit didn't stink. And then I started reading family systems theory, and I realized, hey, there's a golden child, and there's a scapegoat whistleblower, and there's a lost child very often. There's some other complexities to this, but that's sort of the superficial thing. And there's also sometimes proxies. So people can play different roles. So my mom used to end up being a proxy for my dad because he would insist that she discipline us and tell her how to do it. And so sometimes she would. And other times she would be kind of undermining him behind his back with me at least, to help me kind of cope with what was going on. The golden child adopts a persona, and that persona is utilitarian because they know that, at an unconscious level at least, that the abuser will indiscriminately target. So they seek to become a pleaser, and they act in a way that that fulfills the expectations and the hopes of the abuser. And in my family's case, like many, a narcissist wants to be able to have a child in the family to hold up as the poster child of all the successes and all of the the best attributes of the family, and then they keep the secrets about the rest. So we have these multiple dynamics. You've got the enabler, the abuser, the golden child, the scapegoat or whistleblower, and the lost child. Well, that dynamic plays out at scale. So in a workplace where there's abuses of power and where there's bullying, you have your bully. The bully very often conscripts bystanders, flying monkeys, to act as their proxies. So they engage people in a sort of psychic alignment against the target, and they may make up stories. They may whip up kind of anger and hatred and use gossip and manipulations in order to get their proxies to exert force and abuse against their targets. And then you've got some bystanders. The bystanders really don't want to get involved because they know if they do anything that they're going to be next. And so they kind of keep silent. They see what's happening, and they may kind of say, well, it's not that bad. They're going to make some excuses for themselves. And then you've got your target, obviously, and there may be some people in that environment that are kind of working to subvert the bully. And then the bully has their golden children. Again, this works at scale. So when Donald Trump was in the White House, he played this game. He had scapegoat groups, target groups, right? So coming down the escalator talking about Mexican rapists. That was a way of whipping up sort of free-floating anxiety in the general public about scarcity and targeting and pointing to a target. And so he's whipping up minions, right? Whipping up proxies, right-wing racists and people who have sort of limited language on how to describe the world, who would tend to believe these kinds of things. You'd have the whistleblowers and the scapegoats, the people who were shouting out, saying this is wrong. The Democrats sort of filled that role, but there was a deeper sentiment, I think, amongst people who were pushing back against Donald Trump. The woke are no different. Everything to do with a bully. The bully is looking for something called supply. You could think of that as psychic energy. They're looking for that psychic energy, and they extract it from people around them by manipulating them, by abusing them, by inflicting pain. There's something called Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is the pleasure in someone else's misery. And that pleasure is narcissistic supply. It's power. And what we're seeing with the woke ideology is it's a bullying dynamic. They have identified their victims, the reason for their, they have identified the victimized and identified the perpetrators. The perpetrator is the target. The justification for targeting the individual or group whiteness is because of victimization. And they can script other people into this. And if you convert to the woke religion by acknowledging your white privilege and confessing, and you become an ally, and you're a middle-class white woman who's fighting for racial justice, you're a proxy. You're a flying monkey. You're a stooge. But also the golden child. Oh, look at these people. They're so anti-racist. It's wonderful. And they're so, into decolonization. And they're so woke about protecting poor trans kids. These are actually bullies. They are proxy bullies, but they're bullies nevertheless. And their given excuse is that there's a victimization, and so they're going to act morally in their minds to establish themselves some supply through a sense of inflating their own self-worth. How do you break the cycle? Well, we have to shine a light on it. I'm going to talk a little bit more in another video about the vampire story. 30 years ago in writing school, I promised to tell a vampire story, and truth be told, I didn't have one ready, but I got the doozy of the vampire stories, and it ties to what's going on with this ideology and how we're handling it and coping with it in life. So if you're seeing this dynamic, just realize that these are human patterns. Tribes can do this against other tribes, nations against other nations, individuals within families who play the same game. And there's an old expression that's tied to astrology, and everybody kind of misunderstands it, in my opinion. And that opinion, or that idea, that concept, comes from alchemy. And the expression is as above, so below. And really what it is, it's an expression of scale, that human beings play out patterns of behavior from small family and small group dynamics all the way up to dynamics at a societal level. When we start dividing and getting into real dysfunction at a societal level, then we get into real serious problems. And these groups, we have groups of bullies, we have groups of proxies, we have groups of targets, we have groups of allies, we have groups of bystanders. And managing and dealing with groups that are running patterns like this is even more difficult than dealing with it at an individual level. So the first thing is to shine some light on it. And part of that light is understanding what the pattern dynamics are, and then try to figure out how to cope with it. And this is a process that we have to learn how to act out to break these negative patterns, these abuse patterns, abusive power patterns that are happening in universities, in schools, in workplaces, in families, and that's extremely important. If we don't get this figured out, the abuser will burn the damn house down. They will hold on control while the world burns, and they'll justify it. So we're dealing with the same pattern as Donald Trump, the right wing, except it's going to be on the left, and we've got to recognize that there's a problem. That's the first step in dealing with any kind of addiction or abuse dynamic. Is we got a serious problem right now, and if we don't do something about it, this society that we live in is going to be undergoing some very, very significant and serious changes over the next few years.